Good morning, and good day, and welcome back to the class of New Testament background of New Testament. This is our second week number 2. This is where we left off, and we're talking about actually doing an exercise study on the story in the book of John where Jesus was encountering a Samaritan woman. And in that particular story, there are quite a few elements that we need to look for about the backgrounds. And that's why I chose that particular passage. But most of the stories that we find in the gospel, that we do have these elements that require a further study to better understand the story itself, and then eventually help us to understand the message in that story. So we'll continue having a little expository study on the story of a Samaritan woman at the Jacob's well. So it was about noon, which is an hour. The weather is pretty much like California. So around the noontime, the sun is way up there high, and probably is not the hottest. 2 p.m. is hottest, but pretty hot. And no one comes to the well to draw water because it's too hot, too sunny. Usually, most women will come to the well early in the morning to draw water and get ready for the breakfast and get ready for the day. But this lady, for some reason, come about noon. So knowing the fact the weather is pretty hot and the culture and the social cultural norm that the woman usually don't come to the well at the noontime, that tells us a pretty important clue. Meaning that she probably, most likely, wants to avoid any crowd or any other woman for the matter. And then second point, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. That's conversation between Jesus and Samaritan woman, and the reason she's saying that is, basically, it's like a Joseon dynasty in Korea, men usually do not associate with a woman who is not acquaintance or a family member. So pretty much the same culture. And especially the Jewish man would not associate with a Samaritan woman, which were considered the second-class citizen. Sometimes Jews considered Samaritan less than animals or domestic animals. So that was kind of a culture. So we also need to know that background about how women were treated at the time of Jesus, and especially those Samaritan women as a really low in the social rank. So again, understanding the social structure and social rank is another key in understanding the message, and also it's an issue about the socio-cultural background of the time. So again, we see another evidence how these socio-cultural backgrounds are important in understanding the narrative itself, and then reflected message from it. Another point, for Jew do not associate with the Samaritan. I mean, that's usually put in parentheses in most of scripts that we read today. And that explains. So that kindly gives us a social cultural background to help us understand. But usually the Bible passages that we read, either it's the Gospel or Acts or any other letters in the New Testament, it doesn't give those parentheses commentaries. And some Bible with the commentaries, they do give these explanation below the text, right? So those helps, and those commentary with the socio-cultural or geographical backgrounds written under is helpful. It does help us to understand. Another point, you have had 5 husbands, which even today, in today's standard, it's considered unethical, or the life is tough, or she's been, living normal life. So that gives a hint and clue to the kind of woman that Jesus is encountering, which will give us alarm. Why would Jesus talk to some woman who is not so ethical? So again, the background information, having 5 husbands in the even Jewish culture and even in Samaritan culture is considered somewhat not normal. So we, knowing that she appears at the well at the time of noon, highest sun, and then another explanation that Jews, especially Jewish men, would not associate with the Samaritan woman, and then she had already had 5 husbands, and plus the guy that she is living with today is not even a husband. So that means Jesus had to cross many social, cultural, even ethnic barriers to communicate with this lady, Samaritan lady. So the natural question in doing expository study or inductive Bible study, the question would be, why would Jesus take such a risk to cross all these barriers to talk to a woman? I mean, it wasn't an issue of him being thirsty and getting to have water to drink. So we know that by looking into these, and we are to investigate that question, and eventually the narrative itself explains that Jesus begins to talk about living water, and then he leads that conversation to the issue of worship, which is a matter of spirituality. So all those reasons, at the end, he introduced himself as the Messiah. So we know Jesus crossed all these barriers, socio-cultural barriers. We find out by looking into the New Testament background. And then, see, without having that background information, that we would not know that Jesus intentionally crossed all these difficult barriers with taking the risk of finger pointing by someone who may watch this or hear this later on, even though there is no one to look at him and Actually, the story went out, as we know. And then Jesus would be criticized for talking to a Samaritan woman who is not so moral. And then he easily might got misunderstood and criticized. So we better understand the message in that way. So that's why we are studying New Testament background information. Then Jerusalem. We just look at the Jerusalem, and in lesson 2 of part 3 in your workbook, if you have one. If you haven't gotten one, it will be available, I think, soon enough. So in that, you'll find all the necessary information regarding the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem has very significant importance in understanding both gospel and story of Acts. And it goes beyond that, because the Jerusalem is the main, the center of the place all these stories happen. In the Old Testament, you look at the Chronicles and then the Kings. It does talk about Jerusalem, and it mentions a lot of times. So knowing the significance of Jerusalem in the Jewish culture or Jewish religion is very important in understanding the message, both Old Testament and New Testament. So there are a lot of study done, and then the information regarding the city of Jerusalem. Even non-believers, there are many scholars who are studying the city of Jerusalem. And so we'll talk about that later. It is very important. And we'll continue with the social elements. And the man you now have is not your husband. So ethically, this Samaritan and the woman, so this is like a double jeopardy. Being a Samaritan is second class in that time of the day when Jesus walked on earth. Even though they do share Jewish blood, they are not considered as Jew. They didn't have any privilege. They are not called the chosen people, so-called the chosen. Because the chosen, it means they thought they will be in heaven automatically when they die. Just like today, some Christians, because they went to church, they will be automatically in the heaven. That's not the way that it happened. So similar, the idea and paradigm was present at the time of Jesus. And so Samaritan was excluded from that salvation. See, this is a serious thing, because, if you are told because you're a skin and then your heritage, you're not going to be able to enter the heaven. And because of that, later that conversation regarding the worship, where do we worship? Is it Jerusalem or elsewhere? That issue is important, because for her, even though she is living a so-called unethical life, she wanted to make sure that she ends up in heaven, right, after this life. Because if this life is very bad and, suffering, yet if you don't have hope in the next life or eternal life, then you're very in trouble, right? So that's something that she is very obsessed about, or she is focused. Then the issue of living water. Living water, and today, if you're living in America, you expect the running water from your tap, and you just either drink it, or you do some filtering and drink it. Running out water is a guaranteed thing, whether you live in an apartment or a house or elsewhere in America. You cannot think of not having the running water. But see, in the time of Jesus, the living water or the river or the spring is a very rare thing. Oasis, that's a rare thing. So water, to have it abundantly, is a privilege. It is like heaven. So the question of living water for us today is not a the big deal, but at the time of Jesus in a Palestine culture and the land, to have water running 24 hours, 7 days a week is not only a privilege, as a condition for the happiness or survival. So the conversation regarding living water and that key word, living water, is important in this story, in understanding the story and the message as well. Okay. And then we find some other religious elements that appears in the story. So when we talk about this reality, we'll continue to talk about this one. For this class, I'll use life context and the same meaning, the reality. Our reality that includes social, cultural. In the cultural, it does have religious and ethical and food, lifestyle. These things are in culture. So when we talk about reality, we need to talk about spirituality. When we talk about spirituality, we cannot avoid to talk about a religion. And in the time of Jesus, and still in the Middle East, religion is the major thing. It controls your life. Think of Islamic countries, Islamic states. The religion and the politics and the society and the religion, the culture and religion is all closely woven, as interrelated. You cannot separate religion and the social life or your daily life. In America, the religion and the state, the religion and the society is separated for most of us. But for the believers as Christians, our belief, the Christian belief, should be integrated to everyday life. But that was not the idea. It was what's happening in the time of Jesus. So everyone is religious, and religion is a fundamental element in their daily survival or daily existence. So you cannot talk about the existence at the time without religion. So reality times so their existence may be called religious existence. Their daily, everyday, even eating, sleeping, and getting married, being born, all these things that we do today the daily life or life existence has to do with religious belief. And so we find this religious element in the gospel, the narrative, whether it's Acts or in the gospel, that gives us this green light, or it kind of shines, and you need to, or we need to look into it with our eyes open. So this conversation between Samaritan woman and then the Jesus naturally lead into spirituality, the religious aspects of her existence. So we find the word disciples and the Pharisees, and then gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. That's in the verse 1. If you read John chapter 4, verse 1, these are the words that you find immediately regarding their religion or spirituality. So if you're a good student of Bible, and if you're here as a student of Bible, and as a Christian, or even not as a Christian, it doesn't matter. You can study Bible as non-believer. I mean, that's not only okay, I encourage that. So if you're a student of Bible, and if you're serious about it, and if you're here as a student of the background study in the New Testament, the word disciple, it flags. So it says, look at me. Please try to understand what I'm trying to say, and that vocabulary. So is the Pharisees. You want to know who are disciples and who are Pharisees. Why does, Jesus was so against Pharisees, or why the Pharisees were so against Jesus. So that would be the natural question that we ask as a New Testament student of New Testament. And then who are disciples? Who are disciples? How are the disciples between the John's disciple and the disciple of Jesus different or the same? Those are the kind of question that you ask as a student of the New Testament background. So you want to know not just the meaning of the word, the disciple or Pharisees, but you are going to ask further questions regarding these terms. That's how we approach, or how we begin to tackle against the idea of having the background or understanding the background of particular narrative in the Bible or in the New Testament for us. Then the second point there, it says gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. So we could safely assume, at the time of Jesus, how many disciples you have would have been a measurement or a standard for how good this guy is, or this teacher is. So pretty much it's similar today. I mean, the good teachers would have more students. Usually, not always, but usually. That's why some pastors trying to grow his church or her church, because they want to be better than other pastors. If that is the case, that brings me some issues. Anyway, going back to this. So gaining and baptizing more disciples is important at the time of Jesus, which tells us about the rivalry between John's group and Jesus' group. See, we see some other evidences about the rivalry between John the Baptist and the Jesus. And it causes even the disciple of Jesus to, talk about that issue. We can read that in the gospel and other passages. Then we must worship in Jerusalem. Just forget about this. So we must worship in Jerusalem. See, there is a word worship, and then again Jerusalem. I told you that Jerusalem is a very significant place, symbolic place in the Jewish faith. Even for the Islamic faith, Jerusalem is important as much as what's the I just forgot the word. So they're the most important place in Islamic faith. Just the name of place is not up here. And then Jerusalem is also important. That's why they have that golden mosque in the city of Jerusalem. They do have a mosque there. So Jerusalem and the worship. The worship in today's term, in today's understanding, is different than the worship they used in this conversation. When we think of the worship today for Christians, it means going to church, a local church on Sundays, or even Easter, like just 2 days ago, it was an Easter Sunday. It's a big thing for us Christians. And that's then doing the praise, and then listen to the sermon from the pastor, and then you have fellowship, and that's kind of worship that we are thinking about today. But the worship there is a little different than our idea of worship. So again, as a student of New Testament background, we want to address and ask how the word was conceived or understood by the people at the time of Jesus. And that way we would not misunderstand the narrative or even the message. So again, that's how we look into the Bible passage when we are doing a study on background of a particular passage. Continuing. Neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. Again, here's one very important pattern, or the custom or the culture of worship. In the time of Jesus, they loved to worship, or they thought they need to worship on the top of the mountain. And then you naturally will ask, why would they think it is proper or it is better to worship at the top of the mountain? Look into the story of Moses when he was coming out of Egypt, and when they were, going around and around in the desert of today's probably it's Saudi Arabia somewhere, and Moses went to the mountain of Horeb to communicate with God. And that's a form of worship, right? Even though they had the tabernacles, among their in the center of their, the temporary placement or temporarily stop, because they were continually moving around, and when they just settle down for like a few days, they built that tabernacle in the middle of it. But they, rather, Moses went up to the mountain to pray and to have that revelation from God, and he receives that 10 commandment from in the mountain. So naturally we'll try to ask why they went up the mountain or set an altar on the top of the mountain, if there is one. If there is none, they use a flat land and then erect a big stone to designate that place to be sacred, and say this is the place of worship. So again, why would they erect a big stone? And it's not just a marking, but there is certain meaning and significance. We like to know those things. So that would be another approach on the background study when we do this inductive Bible study or a study of New Testament in our case. Then, next, for salvation is from the Jews. Verse 22. Now, again, there's a religious language. Salvation. Salvation in there may be different than the how we understand salvation today, because they didn't know about Jesus as the Messiah yet. He was not crucified. He was not resurrected. So when they are talking about the salvation, it's not like our New Testament Christian term of salvation. It is somewhat and little different. We do not want to, automatically think that salvation is the kind of salvation that we understand today. No, that's not the case. So when you are a serious student of New Testament, and if you are a student of, having to have that additional effort to understand the message better, which is background, then you would ask, is this salvation is the same as the word that we use today? And the answer is no. Then next question would be, how is it different than the word that we use today? So when we hear the salvation, we naturally, us Christians will think it as being born again, accepting Jesus Christ as the Lord and the Savior in our hearts, in our mind, in our soul, and taking the resurrection as the truth, historical truth, and then He died on the cross, taking our sins, and then eventually the salvation means or will lead to the eternal life in the kingdom of heaven. That's how we understand the concept of salvation today as a Christian. But if we ask Muslim friends, about the salvation, they'll have very different idea than us. And that idea is pretty similar to the concept of salvation which Samaritan woman had at the time of Jesus when he carried out that conversation. So that's kind of approach that we are going to have as a student of New Testament background. Okay. some of the New Testament, or usually many of New Testament narratives and the passages, including the letters to Corinthians, Thessalonians, and Romans, would include the relating or reference. Okay, that's the word that I'm looking for. Reference to the Old Testament. So again, I emphasize, without having the knowledge and the reference to the Old Testament, you will not be able to understand even the Messiah or any other things in the New Testament. So it is a must, it is mandatory that you understand, that you read and understand the Old Testament, because there are many references to the Old Testament in the New Testament Bible, which are critical and important in understanding the message. So here is the one. Verse 5 in John chapter 4. Near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph, Jacob's well. So this story gives a very exact location and even the name of that particular place. See, not many of the stories will have the name of the place, but some of the stories in the Gospel, in the book of Acts, would have this reference to the exact name of the location. When we have that, we are lucky, because it will provide us with not only the certainty and authenticity of the document, it will provide us the necessary information or the clue to the information that we will need to understand the narrative better. So we'll continue to talk about this geographical references in the narrative or in the document, just like Jerusalem. Jacob's well. It has some significance to the story of Jewish people. I mean, in your national stories or the national myth, going back to like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, there are places that is very key and significant and sacred to that particular people, right? So every ethnic group does have it. They do have this particular place which is important in their story or their narrative as a people group, as our ethnic group. And Jacob's well is one of them for Jews. And you just find this information about the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph, and then so it's called Jacob's well. In understanding the Palestine culture, or even the white Middle East culture, when you see the word spring, well, oasis, or river, even though river is not the river like we see in China or Korea. I mean, when we talk about river, it's a big thing. It has tons and tons of water. But in the Palestine land, It's a creek, compared to river, but they call it river because if the water flows all year round, as a great thing in that particular geographical location, because water is a scarce thing, very, very scarce. It's rare. Even the water runs during the rainy season. That's a big thing in that culture. So when you have the word like a well or spring, it means survival. It has to do with very important in their existence. So, in that culture, when someone buys a land with a well, that means, that signifies, I like to stay and settle down in this place. But when it is related to the religious significance, it has more importance. Look into, what happened? Something's missing here. Anyway, so when you find this, you'll go into that Old Testament reference to find out about the meaning and the significance of that particular place. And in the book of Genesis, you'll find that particular story when Jacob's buying that land. And what he did, as soon as he bought the land, he built an altar. When you find this word in the Old Testament, altar it means I am worshiping Yahweh God, which is the central and fundamental to their existence. It has more than religious significance. I mean, in Asian culture, most of us in Asian culture, we have something called the local or indigenous belief, which most time is a shamanistic, right? I mean, in Korea we have shamans, usually the woman, and they have been existent since the beginning of the nation. I mean the people. So even our the story of the beginning, which states Dangun as the initial person who is like Adam in the Bible. So in that narrative, we find that this Dangun guy is a shaman. He is a shaman. So we can safely assume that since the beginning of our story, the Koreans, there is this very strong shamanistic belief. I'm sure that it's the same pretty much same in the Vietnam, China, or Japan, in all these Asian cultures. But for us, the religion, even though it strongly controls the existence of the people, in ancient people, yet it's a form of religion. It's a form of religion. It comes into your existence when you are in crisis, or when you're sick, or when you have something that is really urgent, or something that you cannot handle as a human being. But for Jews, in the Old Testament or New Testament, and in this particular conversation between Jesus and a Samaritan woman, altar is the fundamental in their life. It's not religion as we think. It's their existence. It's a daily thing. Just like not all of them. And if you go to Muslim countries, the Muslim states, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Yemen, or some other places, their life is controlled by religion. I mean, the religion and existence is pretty much integrated. Not so much so in our culture, right? And at the time of Jesus, I mean, in the time of Jacob, even going back, setting of an altar is one of the key things. It's not just a religious significance, it goes beyond that. So we like to know the reference to the altar, setting of an altar as soon as he buys the land. What does it mean? And how that significance or meaning or importance is being translated into this particular story. Because it does. So our study in the New Testament background goes beyond at the time of Jesus, but it goes as far as to the story of Jacob's time. See, that's how we approach our study in the New Testament background. Okay. Next, people and names. So we looked at the geographical reference, and in that story, see, we find quite a few names here. Jesus, John the Baptist, and Jacob and Joseph. These are also the when you see the names in the narratives, in the stories, then that is giving us the sign. It's saying, look at it. It's important. So we want to look at what Jesus means. If you know, I mean, it's okay. But if you don't, if you're a first-time reader in the Bible, then you want to know what the Jesus means. Just like as us in Chinese letter culture, our names do have meanings. Even, I mean, in Western world, most of them do have names. Because usually, I mean, they take names from Bible. John, James, all these are, biblical names. And Jesus, it's not just a sound, it does have meaning to the reference. So it's a Jacob and Joseph. So when you find these things, what we do, I mean, today, you can do it easily. I mean, just go to one of those Christian reference sites, whether it's a Bible Gateway or some other site. I mean, easy. I mean, you just go in there and to the search, type Jesus. And it will give you all the necessary references. It gives a meaning and how that is used and so on. So today it's quite easy because we have this new device. And when I was studying, and 30 years ago, 40 years ago, well, we didn't have that. So we have to have those thick dictionary kind of books. Okay, let's take a short break and 10-minute break, and please come back at 11. So I'll start. And again, I'm going to take the attendance call at the end of the class, because I want you to stay, not go away between the class. So missed you last week.
I know. How are you?
Doing good. Take your break.
She texted me last week, but she's not here today.
Yeah, she's not here, huh? Okay, let us continue the second hour of week number 2. We'll continue with the lesson 2. So first hour we concluded our example study on the story of Jesus and a woman at the well. Now, lesson 2, an introduction to the basics. So this will introduce us to the very basics to the background study. Trying to understand what the background study is, but you have pretty much idea, after last week and then first hour of this class, how we do and what we do in our background study. But we'll try to make it more academic and theoretical. So, background study. We want to know where this background study is positioned or fall into in our broad study of or Christian study or theological study. So when you're doing a theology, some of you may continue to study further in our Christian belief and try to become a leader or even pastors or missionaries. Then you will probably require to have a credential and biblical studies or theological studies. So, even as a Christian believer, you do a Bible study, most likely weekly at your church. So we want to know where this study that we are doing is fall into. And the Christianity, or in the study of Christianity, there are 2 domains or aspects that you do. So Christian existence, if your your belief is Christianity, then you are living a Christian existence. When you're doing it, there are 2 dimensions. One is theoretical one, and the other one is practical one. Theoretical one probably is in your head and your mind, while the practical aspect is about your will and your decision, your communication, your word, and your action. So the practice and the theory is always goes together in most of the areas of our existence. For example, let's talk about marriage. See, when you think of marriage, there are a lot of thinkings and thoughts and teachings about marriage. That's theoretical. But actual marriage, it happens at your home between husband and wife and between the parents and children. So that's practical side. Or if you're doing this like a science, let's say physics. Physics is more of so-called theoretical or fundamental science, which have tendency to have it as a more theoretical one. But that's a misunderstanding, we know that. Because when you're studying physics, there are a lot of so-called laboratory works that are involved as practice. So you have to do test and trial and a lot of lab test thingy. So that's practical aspect. And then if you study physics, then that physics will apply to all the areas of the engineering and science. So, anything that we do as a human being, especially when you're studying something, there's always theory and practice. So, the background study is theoretical portion of our Christian existence. If you're a student, students who are studying Christianity or biblical studies, and then automatically you are required to do some theoretical work, the theories of being a Christian. So in that theoretical studies or aspects, these are the subjects that we study. Number one, theology or theological study. Usually the Bible colleges and the seminaries offer the classes on this theological studies. So you study what we call systematic theology. That is a good example of theological study. Theology proper is again, the systematic study is a so-called theology proper, meaning it focuses on who God is, how Christianity is structured. So it is real theology or theology proper. Then we have something called apologetics, which I also had a class a couple years ago, which is a defense of truth. Because there is always that attack from non-believers or atheists against Christians. So we have not only the right, but we have the responsibility to defend our belief in very logical, rational, scientific, and systematic ways. Doing that is called apologetics. So it's a defense against the theoretical or theological attacks. And one good example is like evolution versus creation. So that's kind of area of apologetics, or defending the Trinity or the deity of Jesus. These are all like topics in the apologetics, or the authenticity of Bible. See, those are the field of apologetics. So it's beyond theology proper, and that is all still in theoretical study. Then doctrinal study is a study of doctrines. It is closely related to apologetics and the theology proper, but you can divide or take it as an independent subject of theoretical study. Doctrinal studies, especially, I gave an example of a Trinity, or predestination, or the virgin birth. These are some of the topics of doctrinal study. It's more than theology proper. Then church history, of course, that is a good part. It requires theoretical study. Now, the bold biblical study. This is where New Testament background study belongs to. So biblical study is the study of the text, the Bible. Study of Bible, the text, is a biblical study. Old Testament, New Testament, study of Acts, study of gospel, study of Romans. All these fall into biblical study. So when we are doing a New Testament Bible study, that means we are doing a biblical study. Further positioning. Okay, practical, study in Christianity is like ethics, laws, evangelism, and missiology, and church growth, and church management. These are some of the examples of very practical or practice in Christian faith or Christianity. This practical aspect is also as much important as a theoretical study, and within that practical study, there are some theoretical portion, but it gears toward actually doing the existence, doing of Christian belief into time and space. So with anything that involves something that you do as a believer, it is categorized into practical aspect or practical study of Christianity. Now, continuing our biblical study. So I told you that the study of New Testament falls into the biblical study. Here are some of the segments or subcategories of biblical study. When you're talking about biblical study, or if you're majoring in biblical study in this school, or any Christian school or seminary, these are the subjects that you need to required to take. One is hermeneutics. It's an interpretation of Bible. So the New Testament background study it belongs to the category of hermeneutics. So we are doing this background study because we want to interpret the Bible or understand the Bible. So the hermeneutics means interpreting, the study of interpretation of biblical text. That's what the hermeneutics is. Then it also covers, biblical study covers biblical history, biblical archaeology, Old and New Testament survey, and individual book study. So these are the areas of biblical study. And again, New Testament study or the text study of the text of New Testament, it is in the field of hermeneutics. So what does the hermeneutics involve? What does the interpretation of biblical text, in our case New Testament, does involve? Number one, linguistic study. You want to study language. That's why if you go to seminary, they want you to study Greek and Hebrew. So usually when I was in seminary, they required us to have at least 2 semesters of Greeks and 2 semesters of Hebrews. That was mandatory. These days, not anymore, because we have very good tools regarding the language. You don't need to actually study the language because there are good dictionaries and reference books that helps, and it's very easy to assess. So you don't need to study the language anymore. Most schools, they'll require just 1 semester of Greek and Hebrew, or some seminaries, they don't require linguistic study anymore. Character study is another way of trying to understand New Testament or Old Testament. For example, New Testament study, you can study the life of Peter, the Apostle Peter. Or you can do like a life of the Paul, Saint Paul. or life of Jesus. These are the example of character study. Old Testament, you can study Moses, you can study Abraham. These are the major characters in the Bible that you want to study and get some lessons. Topical study. For example, marriage in the New Testament. That would be a good topic to study. Or the salvation in the New Testament. Or the salvation according to Saint Paul. These are some of the examples of topical studies. So you just decide a theme and topic from the Bible that has to do with our belief system, and then you will do these topical studies. And intertextual study is another approach of hermeneutics. You compare similar or the same passages that are in other books. For example, one of the most common intertextual study that you would do in the New Testament would be Gospels. Because there are 4 different Gospels, and some of the stories are all recorded in all 4 Gospels, or at least 3 Gospels. So you compare those very similar incidents and try to understand it better. For example, there's a parable of sower. Yeah. Who planted seed. And, there are 4 different, the ground or the place that that seed, grain falls, and then so on. So that story is written in a couple Gospels, and you try to compare them. Those are for example, intertextual studies. And some of the themes, about the church being the body of Christ. Apostle Paul, he loved to use that, that simile or parabolic example, and when he is presenting the theme of church. So it is written in some of his letters to the other churches, and so you try to compare those writings one to another and try to find a better message. Textual study. You go into the text. And then background study is something that we do. It includes archaeological study. But, background study falls into the study of hermeneutics. Now, next topic. So, what is a background study? Especially New Testament background study. I mean, it doesn't matter, Old Testament, New Testament, we do background study on both either testament. Term, background. So when we use the word background in English, it means it is used in these occasions. I do this so we can understand the term background better. Personal background. When you're trying to apply to a school or company, and then they require you to present your personal background, where you were born, how you were raised, and your family history, and then family narrative, and all these things. or even they ask, oh, who are your friends, what your hobbies are. These things are called personal background. So when you're in an English term, personal background means your who you are in your personal history actually. So that's how the background is used in that sense. Background check. When you're trying to enter a military, for example, or you want to become a police officer, or if you want to become a pastor of a church, they require to not only have a personal background, but they want to have a background check. In U.S., background check usually means whether you have any criminal records or use of drugs, and these are the things, or your health status. So those are called background check, and it is the word background used in that sense here. And photo background, when you're taking a picture, I'm sure that you all took your passport photo when you're applying for a passport, and you need to have a white background, right, for the passport photo. So those are like a kind of background we are talking about. Or you're taking a selfie somewhere in the tourist location, then you want to include the Eiffel Tower or whatever in your background. So that's the word background. And then complexity. Just skip the effects of background. Complexity. Background, it can be very simple or it can be complex. In the New Testament story, usually background is very complex. I mean, the life itself, your existence is complex. None of our lives, our existence are simple. Unless you're a baby, I mean, you just wake up, eat, and then you pee, and then eat, and then sleep. And that's a very, simple life cycle, simple existence. But we are not a baby, and our lives are complex. As much as our lives are complex today, it was complex at the time of Jesus. So automatically we will assume that the background that we are studying is very complex. So background is complex. It's not that simple. It includes the values and implications. The reason that we are studying the background, because it does, one's background or the background of story or background of the existence, whether it's Jesus or whether it's disciples or whether it's just mass of people who are coming to listen to Jesus, and the geographical information or cultural information that we are looking into, those have values. So one's background does indicate certain values to the society, to a person, to the text that we are reading into, and it does have certain implication. The implication that we are looking for is how does that imply to our understanding of the message, or the expression of the message, or formulation of the message at the time. So we can have a better or exact understanding of the message that is intended by the author who is writing the narrative or who is writing the letters, and even in Revelations including. So we safely and naturally assume that each background information that we are trying to look into or study does have these values, hidden values and implication that comes with it. So our job is trying to find what are the importance and what are implications for our understanding of the text as we approach that so-called background. Now, continuing the concept of background, the background of a certain document or documents or text. Number one, one of the first thing that you look for in a document as we begin to study so-called background is who is the author, who wrote this, and who are receiving this document, who are the readers. So readers and the author is one of the key information regarding the background. Some of the letters that Paul wrote, for example, the letter to Romans or Roman Church, he explicitly say that this is I, the Paul, the apostle who is writing this particular letter. But compared to that, if you look into the Hebrews, book of Hebrews, you don't see that. So there is a lot of assumption and the guessing and the study regarding the authorship of Hebrew. And most likely it would have been written by Paul. But we are not sure because that doesn't say. And then who are the readers? It is clear for the book of Romans, it is written to the Roman Church in Italy today. And not only you're identifying the authorship and the readership, there is the question or the reference or implication that comes with it. If you find this certain particular author, what is his writing style? What is his focus? I'm saying his because all the 100% the New Testament writers are guys, men. So I can just safely use that language. So, you want to know about the authors. What was his preference? What was his life like? Because the author's life, how he existed, will be reflected in his writings for sure. You cannot write your document, your writings, without having, your influence into it. Your personality, your writing style, your past experience are all woven into your writings. So knowing the author and who he is, how he is, will help us to understand the message better. Readership, same thing. How these readers are. Who are the people in the Church of Rome? We know within the text that there are at least two or three groups of people that are not the same. One, Romans, Gentile Romans. Those are the Italians today. They are the ones. And then you have Jews who are converted to Jesus. So they believed in Judaism, but now they are Christians. So Judeo-Christian, or Christians who are Jews. So Christians who are Romans, Christians who are Jews, and there's another group. actually in the Romans, and they are called the Jews who fled from Jerusalem. So these are the people who became first believers in the first church, but when there is persecution against the Christians in the Jerusalem and the land of Judea, they fled. They ran away from Jerusalem and moved even to Rome. So there are at least 3 groups of people who are having different backgrounds. So background of these readers are important in understanding message, because Paul in the Romans trying to reach these 3 different groups, and when you're doing it, sometimes you can use a certain language for all 3 groups, and sometimes you have to write for the Gentile Roman believers, for Jewish diaspora believers, and then Jewish believers who came from Jerusalem. So he uses different language and different message to these different groups. And knowing that, you will much better understand which passage is for the Romans, the Gentile, and which passage is for the Jews, and so on. So knowing background of the readership will clearly help you to understand the message or the document much better. Second thing that you're looking for when you're studying a gospel or Acts or other letters is time of writing. When this particular the letter was written, and that gives you why Paul uses certain language when he is writing this. So for example, including the place of writing, when Paul's writing the letters in the prison or in the house arrest, then he writes a certain language. So that's kind of helps us to understand the message better. Then reason for the writing. That would be the key, very important, critical, major element in doing a background study of a New Testament document. Okay? So you want to know, sometimes it's obvious why the author is writing this particular letter at the time of writing to the particular readers. But sometimes some of the letters, it does not say anything regarding that reason. But as you read, then you are going to implicate the reason for the writing. And but there is always that trigger incident that caused someone to write, especially the Paul. So you want to know what triggered this particular letters to Corinthians or Thessalonians and so on. So that's important. Then authenticity. We'll just jump that. Elements and the components. We'll talk about the elements and components, like for example, geographical, social, cultural, political, religious. These are the list of the components, elements in the background study. We'll study that. So that's one of the major things that we are going to look for. So elements and components means each categories of background study. Okay. Now, why would you study a background to the New Testament? Of course, Number one, to better understand. What? To better understand what? Its original reality. Any document whether it's your personal diary or whether it's an email or note or memo, any sort of document is out of necessity. And it is written within a given reality that you are in. So it means if you know the reality of that particular person who is writing a document, then you have a much better understanding of the writing itself. See again, once you understand the complexity of the reality or the information regarding the reality of the writer, the author, then you will have a much better understanding to the writing or text itself. So that's why we do this. So first thing that you want to know, the original reality. Again, so if you're reading the gospel, we know that John's gospel is a little different than 3 other gospels. And then you ask, why is John's gospel different from the 3 others? And then you go back to his reality, the Apostle John. And then he is trying to write the gospel for the Jews and Jews only. Okay, he does not have the other Gentiles who are not Jews in his writing. So knowing that information helps to understand the message, So his reality says, God tells him, or Holy Spirit tells him that you're going to write a gospel or a story of Jesus for the Jews so they can become believers. So that's his reality. And we, by doing the the background study, will reach better understanding, or we may be able to reach the original belief and thoughts and ideas in that particular text. Okay. Also, instead of religion, you can place reality, belief, and existence. So we want to know the original state as much as possible. What they believed and how they lived and what their reality is like. Thus, by the end of the day, when you're finishing your Bible study of New Testament, will want to have better understanding of its message. So this is the most important thing, the message. All the reason that we are doing any Bible study, whether you're Christian or not, doesn't matter, is to find out the message of that particular writing. So we go through all this complex and difficult process to reach its message. the original message. You don't want to twist it, or you don't want to divide it, or you just want to take a part of it, but you want to take a whole message as it is given at the time of writing. So that's the reason that we are doing the background study. The background itself is not our goal. No. So you need to evaluate that background information and relate that to the text, and then we'll eventually reach the final message from that particular document. Next. Now, very, very brief way of trying to answer this question. How do you study a New Testament background? It's not that simple, but let's try to simplify it as much as possible. That's how, it's an overview. First step is to find the textual clues in the New Testament. So, the textual clues, what I mean by textual clues is the text itself will give you the clues or leads to what you need to look for. Just like we did in the story of a Samaritan woman, there are key words or concepts or the expressions or descriptions that draw your attention, and then those are so-called textual clues. Or sometimes, just like we have done in the first class, it does give information in parentheses. At the time, the Jewish man would not associate with Samaritan woman. So that's clues within. And we want to find those clues within. Okay? Then, I told you that, to study and understand New Testament, you have to go back to Old Testament many times. So textual clues in the Old Testament. So you go into that reference. I think you would have, if you're a good student of Bible, your Bible would be the so-called reference Bible. Reference Bible. If you have YouVersion software in your cell phone or your smartphone, let me show you. See, here's the Bible YouVersion, and then not all the translations would, but some of the translation would have a little mark, small, like a quotation mark, right above the particular word or verse. It looks like, where is that? It looks like this. My ESV, I think NIV versions would have this reference mark. And you click that, and then it'll give you so-called references. This thing is that what you're looking for in doing the background study of both Old Testament and New Testament. It's going to lead you to the particular Bible passage that helps you to understand that verse that you are studying. So you want to look for that. So we want to have so-called reference Bible rather than just plain Bible. Not the commentary Bible. Commentary Bible helps, but I'd rather have a reference Bible that does not have commentary. Commentary Bible is like a secondary source. You can use it when you're done Bible study. That's how I, approach my inductive Bible study. But you have to make your own decision. Then, once you're done with the Bible itself, then your background study will go beyond the Bible. It's called extra documental clues. Then you'll look into so-called archaeological clues. That's not in the Bible, but that is done by so-called Bible archaeologists who are looking for those clues that are related to understanding of Bible or Christianity for matter. So there are some archaeological clues, and then you do what we call educated guesses. Many of our academic work requires you to be more creative, but before you become a creative, most rational and scientific and how we call fundamental for a student is do a educated guess. What it means, you arrange and then evaluate the information that you have and try to reach your own conclusion or your own theory about the question or the matter or issues that you are trying to address. See, this is very important for us Asian students because we are not trained to do that. Basically, we are told what to memorize, what to learn, and that's it. We are not trained to do the educated guesses or creative approaches to our learning. And that's why many of our Asian students have difficulty in the American college and university level and beyond. When you're going to graduate school, you'll see the difference. The difference that makes. The American education system is open in that sense that they are training their students to be able to build his or her own educated guesses and conclusions. It might be wrong. The answer that you find might be wrong, but the focus in American education system is rather on the process that you are trying to reach an answer rather than getting the right answer. See, that makes a big difference, even though it looks like a very small difference. So when I teach the Bible, I, just face this wall. For us Korean American, especially those who came from Korea when they were little, have less of an American education system. They don't want to do this educated guesses. So having to gather the information and evaluate them and formulate, that's the word. Formulate your own answer is very important for us, the student of inductive Bible study. So the background information or background study will help us to do that. Okay. So why don't we stop here and we'll get you to do the attendance, and please